everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to my weekly reading wrap up. And I gotta tell you guys, number one, I'm pretty proud of myself, and the reason I'm proud of myself is I didn't read 20 books this week, and I'll tell you, I am happy about that, okay? So here's the thing, we're leading up to the end of the year, we all know this, and there is a lot of stuff as a booktuber and someone who rates books and will have favorites and stuff like that has to do when you get to the end of the year. And I have some plans in place for that already, more things that you're going to see, but I just have wanted to chill a little bit. So I was actually reading a little bit slower this week. Also, I was annotating 2 different books. One of those is, I'll get to it in a minute, and the other ones being the Bridgerton books. As I reread those, I'm annotating them, which means I can't, listen to them, and I need to really focus because I'm highlighting things and stuff. It's not that I can't listen to them. That was a silly way to word that. I just mean I'm not, listening to them while I'm doing stuff. Because I sometimes will listen along to a book while I'm reading it. But when I'm annotating it, I don't, listen and then try to go back and find the places. So a lot of times, you guys know this, one of the reasons I read so much is because I listen to books. And I did do that this week, but just not with those particular books. So let's go ahead and dive into this. I still read 9 books. It's not like I just gave up the ghost and stopped reading anything. It's just that I was a little more focused on certain books, which was fun. But I also didn't have any 5 stars this week, which is strange. But there's a couple that I feel like would have been 5 stars in any other way. But again, I'm being a little more stingy at the end of the year because after going through my stats and realizing that I give so many 5 stars, and then because in my head I'm coming up with a plan of how to determine what my favorite books are, I'm kind of holding all of these books against my favorites. Not that they could still stand up to it if they hit that spot for me, but I'm just very aware of what I look for in a favorite book right now. And some of these just none of them really popped into that favorite area for me. But that's okay. It was still a great reading week. I also didn't have anything less than a 3.5 star. I just didn't have any 5s. So starting off with, we'll start with the books that I actually read in my reading vlog. So that video went up on Friday. Last weekend during my quarantine, I did a weekend reading vlog. Just so y'all know, you all have been so sweet because that video just went up, so everyone's been really sweet in it. But today was actually the last day of my quarantine, so my friend and I went to a couple thrift stores together and it felt good to see people. I mean, still being just as careful as before, but it was nice to be out of my apartment for a little bit because it was a bit rough being in here. But let's go ahead. Actually, one of the things I found at the thrift store is I found these beautiful bookends. All right, and they are a music note. I'm always looking for really cool bookends, but they're usually a weird theme, or they look like a crown molding or something like that. And I just love these succinct little metal harps, and they're cute. So I thought I would put the books that I read behind it. So the first one I got to talk about is I read 7 Nights to Forever. I won't talk too in depth about this because you can go watch the reading vlog, which I'll link up above. This book is about James and Rose, and Rose is a prostitute 1 weekend a month, a very highly requested prostitute at this specific brothel, and James is a married man who is in a very toxic relationship for the time that this book is set at. This is obviously a historical romance. Evangeline Collins only has 2 books under this pen name, and they are both based out of this brothel. And this was really good. This really addressed how a man in this time could still be in an abusive relationship. So I did really appreciate seeing that, seeing what would make a man feel the way that he feels. And it was hard, man. I mean, anyone can be abused and mistreated. And while some of you will say, and rightly say, that's not a good enough reason to go to a prostitute for that. But I'm an open-minded person, and the things that this wife was doing and the way that she was manipulating him, I mean, first off, it took this guy like 5-6 years before he ever even thought about going to a prostitute instead of his wife. And I don't know. There's just, these books are amazing, and I love seeing sex workers portrayed, especially in historical romance, because we think it's scary now. Like, just add a whole nother layer to it if you go back then. And also, Rose, she's a prostitute 1 weekend a month. So learning why she does it, and she's trying to take care of a younger brother who doesn't know what she's doing to pay for his debts, and neither does she want to tell him, because she knows if she tells him, he would stop what he was doing. And I'm like, yeah, but don't you want him to stop spending money so you can eventually stop being a prostitute at this place? So it was, I think that the storyline was bold and brave. It just got a little bit lost. And then again, because of those things that give me kind of a squeaky feeling inside, I just didn't fall in love with James and Rose the way that I wanted to. But this is a very interesting look at it. So I did give this a 3.5. But I wouldn't deter anyone from reading it. Evangeline Collins' other book, Her Ladyship's Companion, that book gets a 5-star for me. I think it probably is because it's a male prostitute and a woman requesting him. And I don't know. I just liked that better. But then I read A Rogue by Any Other Name, which this was my first Sarah MacLean. Again, this one is in the reading blog. It was good. It made me intrigued enough to start another. I have tried a Sarah MacLean before, but to be fair, I didn't get it enough of a chance. And also I'm finding historical romance that I have trouble getting into, I usually have better luck if I listen to it. So, I did buy the audiobook of this one, and it made it easier. So this one is about the Marquis of Bourne, and this one is they were childhood friends, and she was really in love with him. And then he made a mistake and gambled away his like family land and home. And so he spent the last decade like rebuilding his life and doing that in some interesting means, and now he's at the point where he wants to get it back. And so his childhood friend Penelope, who has been writing him letters this entire time he's been gone, she hasn't been sending them all, but her father makes her dowry the land that belongs to Bourne. And so then this ends up being like a forced marriage, because he forcibly compromises her, not as in like forces his way on hers, but he makes the perception that he did that by forcing her to like stay the night alone with him. So he didn't assault her, but he did like kidnap her for a night, and so she's forced to marry him. And it's a really hard thing, because she now just wants to like, cool, well, I'm married to this guy who runs gaming hell, and I loved him when I was a kid, and why is this marriage not giving me what I want out of it? And it was okay. I gave this 4 stars. It was a cool premise. I'm definitely very intrigued about the sequel to this one, which is it, I know it's the Earl one, No Good Earl or something like that. I'm not sure. But it's about her sister, and I'm excited about it. Her sister has a like brain for math, and so I'm really excited to read that one. So, but this was all right. It was good. Then another one that I read for that readathon is The Truth About Love and Dukes, and this is by Laura Lee Gurke, and this is my first book by her. I was just really trying to read some like new ones for this. Also because, as you'll see in my reading vlog, I did kind of a random number generator by asking you guys for numbers so that I wouldn't just get stuck in a rut, and I'm really glad that I did that, because though I didn't have any 5 stars out of this reading vlog, I'm reading books that are all like first books by the authors, or like first in series. And that can be a hard place to start with people, right? Like I think of my favorite books by my favorite authors, and it's rarely their first books that are my favorite. However, okay, this one had a fun premise as well. This had a working woman, as in like she works for a newspaper, and her name is Irene, and she writes as Lady Truelove. So kind of like a Dear Abby. And she gives advice to people, and she gives advice to this certain lady that kind of ruins Henry's life. Well, he thinks it's going to ruin his life. So he has a widowed mother, and she wants to marry this like actor or painter. He's a painter, and he's a fortune hunter. But here's the thing. The mom knows that he's a fortune hunter, and she still loves him. And he does love her. But the man can't marry if he's not getting some money, because he has this huge family in Italy that he needs to support. And so he was coming to town looking for an heiress. And he just happens to fall in love with this older woman who her children are all like grown up, but they're not all married. And that's the problem, is that if his mother marries this man, his sisters will have a hard time finding a husband, and it could just ruin a lot of things. So Henry goes to the newspaper, and he has a good idea that Irene is the one being Lady Truelove. She tries to put on this mystery that it's not really Lady Truelove doing it. And he's like, here's the deal. I bought your paper from your dad, and if you don't help me undo the advice that you gave to my mother, I am going to take this paper from you and close it down. So dude comes in swinging his weight around and acting like a dick. However, Henry is a buttoned up proper man, and he does offer some things back. He's like, I'll help your sister find a husband. I will, because here's the thing, he's not going to shut it down and like throw them in the poorhouse. Like, he bought this paper, or will buy this paper, for a lot of money. It's just that she won't get to write anymore, and she would have to marry someone or be a spinster and not have something meaningful in her life, which is almost worse than taking anything else away, because he's just like, you are dangerous. The advice you give is dangerous, and you're getting people in trouble. So it's a bit foolish of him, but when you spend time in his head, you understand where he's coming from, of like, this woman just gave this advice without thinking about it, because basically what Lady Truelove did is encouraged the widowed mom to marry for her heart. She did also give her advice about like, hey, lock down your money, like, don't just like, you know, it wasn't just like, give your heart to this man, but she was like, if you know who this guy is and you understand who he is and you're not going in under false pretenses, like, marry him. And so that's the thing, is Henry's like, you don't understand the advice you give, the ramifications it has to the other people in my family. But obviously Irene starts to learn about Henry and like why he would say that, and Henry begins to see like what a fulfilling life Irene has, and he doesn't want her to lose it. Also, this has a super sexy cover, and I really love this book. I assume more in the book is called, like, the series is called like Lady Truelove or something, and I own a couple more books by her, but this was the first one I'd ever read by her, and I gave it 4 stars. It was really fun. It has a trope in it that I'm not a huge fan of, which I won't say because it doesn't always bug other people, but it's a specific trope that I do not like in historicals. I don't mind it in contemporary, but it doesn't work for me in historicals, and if you want to know, just ask me and I'll tell you. The next book I read was Stroke of Midnight by K. Webster. Ooh, boy. Ooh, boy. I knew that this would be dirty and naughty. And I should have trusted K. Webster because she knows how to do it. So this one is supposed to be like a Cinderella retelling. It is an age gap. It is I wouldn't call it BDSM because, as always with K. Webster, she doesn't give people safe words for anything. But this is it's the degradation side of BDSM. So this man, he's an uptight, really rich guy running a business, and the maid who comes in to do his cleaning, she doesn't do a good job, and so he's on his high horse. He's planning to call in and fire her. This is contemporary, by the way. Call in and have her fired, but instead he looks at the tapes and sees how pretty she is, and so he calls her in. And she's like 19 years old, and he's like 38, and he immediately is like, I want to own you. And he's into humiliation of his partner, which, again, totally fine in BDSM. Totally fine. And he basically offers to, like, be her sugar daddy, but he's, like, a mean one. So he's like, I want you to do different humiliating things for me. And every time you do, he, like, sends her money by, like, PayPal. So he starts, like, with little things. And he'll do like, every time you send me a nude picture, I'll pay you $100 for each one. And he just like throws these out there, and she's like, I don't want to, because the reason she doesn't want to do it is like propriety or like embarrassment, because that's literally it, is he likes to embarrass her. It was a weird kink, but it was really sexy, and it wasn't like degradation with like bodily functions or things, so it wasn't that kind of, it was a lot of like, they called it degradation, humiliation, but it was all a lot of like a little bit of like things happening in public maybe, or like people are a little bit of voyeurism, things where like making their sexual exploits like obvious so that she's embarrassed, like literally that kind of embarrassed. It's hard to explain. I've never read a book like this before. I've only read one other book that had humiliation and degradation in it in this like mean way, because obviously in some BDSM books I've read, if people are doing stuff at a club for like voyeur things, that is one thing, but usually the person that it's being done to them, they like want it. And in this case, the girl doesn't know anything about this kind of life, and this rich guy is just like throwing money at her to help her get out from under her stepmother. So in this one, her dad is still alive, but he is just enamored with the wife and like doesn't pay attention. And so then she also has triplet stepbrothers who are after her, like they want her, and they assault her at different points. And so this rich guy, he ends up being, you know, her savior in that. And this is one in like a part 3 story, so it didn't have an ending. It had a cliffhanger where she was just about to like go to a ball. Some things happen, but I don't know, it was great. It was Webster, so like it went really quick, and it was really sexy, but like I know humiliation and degradation is not going to be a thing for people. It's not my thing either. But that's the thing with me and like kink like that, is I can read the book and find it really hot because the characters find it really hot, where, you know, the way that the author writes it gets me excited about it, but like I would not in any way, shape, or form let someone do that to me or want to talk about it. That's something that I just like about that kind of like erotica or sexy stuff, is that the author writes it so good that while I'm in the story, I feel like I'm into it. But then as soon as it's done, I'm like, wow, what did I just read? So that's something that happens to me when an author writes a really good story and I feel sucked into it, that I don't notice that I was reading a book like that. So that's the thing. Woo! So then I read Riffs and Refrains, which is book 2 in the Hush Note series. Each one of these is by a different author. The first one is called Lies and Lullabies by Serena Bowen. This one is by Devney Perry. This is all about the same band that's called Hush Notes. They're a band that's been together for a while, so this is also like kind of like a middle-aged story, like people are in their 30s. I think this one, she might be only 28, so maybe I shouldn't say middle-aged. I don't mean that. But the first one, so I'm reading this series with my friend Crystal from Crystal's Bookish Life. Hi, hello, in case you haven't checked her out before, do it. But yeah, this is about a band. I don't always love rockstar romances, so it's funny because I read 2 of them this week. But this one is about the drummer. Her name is Quinn. She's a girl, obviously. I just said she, and I mean, not obviously, whatever. It's about a female drummer, which was really cool. And the book starts with her finding out that her grandmother has passed, and so she needs to go home to Montana for the funeral, and she hasn't been back there since she left when she was like 18, 19, and on that time, she broke up with her boyfriend and like hasn't really spoken to her parents since then. She's talked to her mother off and on eventually, but her grandmother was the only one she still had a significant relationship with. And so her grandmother set a few things up for her, and so there was Graham, who, it was a little confusing in the story. That is something I'm going to tell you, because she called her Gran, and then Graham's name is Graham. And so I listened to this on audio, and like it would every once in a while throw me up who we were talking about. So that is something I'll say for the author, is like, if you're writing a book that you know you're going to do the audio for, maybe don't make names sound so alike, because I don't know, they would be talking about both people even within the same sentence sometimes. And if you were reading that, you'd be able to tell the difference between Graham as in graham cracker, the guy, and Graham as in Gram, grandma. But when you're listening to it, those names sound the same. So just a tiny little critique. Obviously not enough that you like shouldn't read this book. But this book, big trigger warnings for grief. Holy moly, it's intense. The things that I did love about this book, though, is I really did love Graham because he's a single dad. And the way that he's a single dad is that he was always in love with Quinn. But she left when they were like 18, and he never really loved anyone since then. But he did have a couple hookups, and one of those hookups, when he was in college, the woman got pregnant. And he convinced her not to have an abortion, that they could make it work. But then once the baby was born, she didn't want to be a part of it. It was too much. So Graham kept his daughter. And he's a single dad because the mom left. Not because she died or was a widow. They were never together even. And I will tell you, I loved seeing that. Like, that alone kept this book riding for me when there was parts of it that were a drag. Because this is a heavy book to read, guys. This is a second chance romance where, like, people just didn't talk about shit. Like, just didn't talk about it. This also has, religion is a big part of this book. Quinn's dad is a pastor. He's still a pastor. They don't necessarily, like, harp on, there isn't a lot talking about, like, that religion disapproved of things. But there definitely is that undertone that if you're from a religious family, you will maybe understand what's going on. But also, her family wasn't judgmental as much as it sounds like they are. That's the thing is, her dad was very upset when she wanted to just give up everything and join a rock band. And so they had a fight. And he went too far with some things that he said. And he was a little embarrassed as being a pastor that his daughter did that. But the problem is that in 10 years... neither one of them, like, tried to talk about it again. And that's the part that's sad, because here's the thing. She didn't have a bad dad. It's not like this was a thing of patterns where he was a pastor but secretly, like, abusive or all these things. They just didn't understand each other, which can happen whether your dad's a pastor or not. Let's be real. You can have miscommunication with your parents. And neither one of them tried to reach out at all, you know? And that was really hard to see. But I mean, this book gives you hope for it. That's the point. Like, it doesn't start and end the same way at all. But also, you know, it makes it understand why, like, Graham didn't keep, like, trying to reach out to her because he then had a new baby. And the thing that is really tough when Quinn gets home is that Graham and his daughter, do they live with his mom? I think they live with his mom. Maybe, I can't remember. But Quinn's parents helped raise his daughter with him. And so that's the thing is Quinn is coming home, and not only has she been an outsider because she's been off being a rock star all this time, she's also an outsider when her family, and then the guy that she loved so much and it didn't work out, he literally is a part of her family in a way that she's not. And yeah, so there was just a lot. So that's the thing of, like, this story was really good and beautiful, and I think if some of the things I said are maybe something you've went through, so you think this could be good catharsis for you, this book was kind of a bummer. It was kind of a bummer. And the happy parts of it didn't last long because then we were at the end of it. So that's the thing for this book, is it was kind of a bummer. I still gave this 4 stars because there is a particular moment in the epilogue where, like, I was going to give this a 3.5 stars, and then a thing happens, and I literally, like, burst into tears. I was texting with Crystal, and I was like, when you get to the epilogue, message me, because there's a certain thing that happened that I was like, okay, I'll give it 4 stars. But I definitely loved the first one better for me. I think Crystal feels differently, so I look forward to hearing what she has to say. But yeah, and I'm also very excited to read the 3rd book, which is by Rebecca Yarros, also a new-to-me author. I haven't read any of her books yet. And that one is Muses and something, which is about the guitar player, and he gets himself into trouble in this one. So I'm very excited to read that. So, another 4-star for me. The sun is going down. It's getting darker as I film this. Sorry. So then I read Managed, which I physically read that one. So this is one of the ones I was annotating, but it's my friend Izzy's book because it's one of the traveling books that we're doing. This is something that we started way back in the summer. and then life has happened. But there is some books circulating by me and some of the romance crew, and I had gotten this one from her a couple months back, and I was just waiting for the inspiration to read it. And then once I read Riffs and Refrains, which I had managed on my TBR, but I also was like, I need the motivation to do this because I want to get to it before the end of the year and get it passed on to the next person. And I've heard Managed was really great, and it's the book that Izzy sent me, so I was here for it. So this one is a rockstar romance, but it's about the manager. It's the second in the series. I haven't read the first one in the series, but I also have listened to the Fated Mates podcast where they talked about Managed, and I've read other Kristen Callihan before and really liked it. Specifically, her Game On series is one of my favorite contemporary sports romances. But this one is about a rock band, and the way that the series starts is that the band is getting back together after one of their members attempted suicide. And he attempted suicide, and it was pretty publicly captured because he'd asked one of the paparazzi, who was a woman, to come back to his apartment with him, and then he did this, and we find out that he had done this and asked her there because he wanted someone to find him that, like, wasn't one of his friends. So a really shitty thing to do to the person. And that person who we meet in this book was actually used to be the paparazzi. And so she is the same paparazzi who took those photographs, and yeah. And now she does kind of like social media revamp for things. And so she gets hired to do that because the band is trying to show that they're back together and things are good. And the way that we have our meet cute is that she is on a plane ride and she got bumped up to first class. And then the guy who sits down next to her, his name is Gabriel, he had bought both seats because he's a nervous flyer, so much so that he gets sick almost. He hyperventilates and freaks out. And so he has this really vulnerable moment with this woman on this plane where she's there and she comforts him, and it's actually like really sexy. She doesn't comfort him in a sexy way, but there's some like she cuddles with him to help him. It's really cute. And then of course they get there and find out that not only is she this person they know from the past, from a really horrible situation, but also she's now going to be traveling on their tour with them, and oh wow, isn't this the most dramatic thing that's ever happened to us, right? So this book was a slow burn, as in we don't even kiss until 70%, which I think a lot of people would call it a warning for you, but it is a really sexy, and like they're very vulnerable with each other right off the bat, and there are other kinds of intimacy. Like, I absolutely know that. I'm not against a book because they don't go to Pound Town right away, but I think for me, Gabriel isn't the kind of alpha male that I'm a huge fan of. He's just not my type, but I see why people love this book because it's very emotional, and it's nice to see a man who has anxiety, and he's a powerful alpha male, and he has anxiety and stressors that he can't control, and he is an insomniac. And this woman who is just crazy, chatterbox, all these things, he calls her Chatty Girl is her nickname, he's able to find peace with her. And that is extremely sexy and touching to read about. So I gave it a 4-star. It's on its way to Ashley, and will eventually make its way back to Izzy. And I had fun writing in it and leaving little notes for her. And I can't wait until I sent off The Bride to one of my friends a while ago. And I know things have gotten like held up, but I do hope eventually that makes its way back here because I'm really excited to see what everybody says. I loved The Bride. It was beautiful. Then I read Abel by Katee Robert. I was able to get an e-arc of this. I mean, not able to. I'm on her Patreon, so like I pay to get her arcs is how it sounds, which you can too. If Katee Robert is someone you enjoy, you can join her Patreon group. And I think to get the e-arcs, I think you can just join the lowest level. It's like $5 a month. And she always has like 1 or 2 books. I mean, sometimes coming out per month. Like this month, I got 2 arcs because I got to read, last week I read Queen Takes Rose. And then this one I read Abel. And Abel, okay, this series, so is so confusing to explain. So I'm not going to take too long to do it because just look up the book if you want. But this is the beginning of her new series. That's the follow-up series to the Wicked Villains. And there's some crossover. Particularly if you have read / will read Queen Takes Rose, Malone, she has a crossover into this series because she's from Sabine Valley. Also, Beast from The Beast, he used to date someone who was in Sabine Valley, and we will actually meet that person eventually because he's part of this family. And so this is a loose retelling of Seven Brides, Seven Brothers, and instead of like a barn raising, there is this like gladiatorial battle that happens at the beginning because Abel Payne, his family of men is trying to take back control of their faction of Sabine Valley. So this is the thing of like, in my review of this, I give this book 4.5 stars because I'll tell you in a second why, but the 0.5 star that it's missing for me is that I need more setup from this Katee. Please. Like, I need there to be like an epilogue we can read, a prologue we can read separately, or just a better setup, because the world that she created, I am so here for it. It's so exciting, but it's not the same of the Wicked Villains as we can like build this, you know, the underworld and this sex club up. Like, the setup of this valley and like the factions, like I have no idea what's going on. And she's even making like art designs. We've gotten to see some concept art of like each faction has like a design like they do in like Divergent or whatever, and I'm so here for it, but I don't understand it enough. So I would like there to be like an epic prologue that I can read somewhere that sets up the world for me, and like a map or just something, because it's not like it's full fantasy. Like, this is still like a contemporary sexy thing with just a little bit of fantasy in it. But I need to understand what's going on more because I'm so into this story, but the politics and stuff of it is such an important part of it, because that's literally why Abel does this battle royale, and he basically wins a bride for each of his brothers, and by like spreading that marriage throughout, they're like taking back control. And so there was a guy that he used to be in love with there named Eli, and when Abel wins all of these competitions, he chooses Eli's wife as his bride because he can pick anyone he wants. And so Eli is like, no, you can't have my bride. And the bride is like, dude, don't mess this up. He could like hurt our people if you screw with him. And Abel is like, well, don't worry, I'll take you too, because you can have a male bride as well. A mail order bride. No. So not all of the men like in fact, this is the whole series, 7 books, is going to be menages, and they're going to be either MMF or MFF, the whole series. And it was funny. I was giggling to myself a little because there's 7 brothers and they're named like alphabetically, like the Bridgertons. So I was kind of laughing because I'm also reading the Bridgertons, and I was like, this is funny because these are completely different stories, but they also have like the alphabetical name thing, which is not like it's unique to the Bridgertons, but it made me laugh. So this book is super sexy. It's a hate fucking is happening a lot. The swords cross, and it was great. It was great. But I feel like I didn't get enough even of like this couple, and now we're going on to another one, because this world, like I'm telling you, it's fun. But I feel like with the concept that it is and what it is, like I wish it had either been even bigger, or we had that prologue so that all of that world building and stuff could have happened there, and then I could have focused in more on the characters. So then I also got to read an e-arc of Make Me Yours by Melanie Harlow. This is her new book, which actually comes out on like Monday or Tuesday. So this is the next book in the Bellamy Creek series, which is her kind of take on like Schitt's Creek, which is really cute. The first one really feels like that. This one is a best friend's little sister. Also, they've been friends, but our hero, Cole, he had a wife. He got married when he was really young, and his wife actually had a hemorrhage after their daughter was born and died. So he's been a widower for 9 years. His daughter's 9 years old. And our heroine, Cheyenne, she had a crush on him back in high school. So I don't love pining, but in this case, I kind of did, because she was 3 years younger than him, so not a ton younger, but enough that when he was like falling in love and marrying his wife, he was like 20, 21, and she was like, 17, 18. So that, and now it's, 12 years later, and he's finally ready to do something, but he's also scared because he feels like we're not promised every day, and he's really nervous about loving someone again. But it was a really fun book, and it was really sexy. The way that this has an impetus is that she gets drunk, and they've been spending a lot of time together because they are both back living in their childhood homes, which are right next door. Because in the last book, Cheyenne moved in with their mom to be with her, and then Cole, he has been living with his mom for a while with his daughter, and they're getting ready to move into their own home finally. And so what happens as the impetus is that it's a drunk text situation, and they've both been thinking about each other already. And so she's like, it's stupid, because don't ever do this. She types up a fake text to him that she wants to send him, and then accidentally sends it. And it was the super sexy stuff of everything she wants him to do to her. And then he's thinking about her too. And then she happens to send him this, and he's like, oh my God, like, keep going. And so it starts as like a sexting thing and then goes from there. So it was really cute. 4.5 stars for that as well. And then the last book I need to talk about is, spoiler alert, I read this yesterday with my friend Bree from 11 Words. We also wanted to do a read together this month. I've been doing buddy reads with my friends. I'm gonna put this one back so that the camera doesn't focus on them. But I get the hype. I feel the hype. The hype is real. I gave the book 4.5 stars. I still can't like fully express how I feel about this book. I was tried to with Bree. The thing I will say is that it wasn't 100% 5-star for me. Even though as the book was ending, I was like, oh my God, it's a 5-star. Like, it's totally a 5-star. I love it so much. But then when I like was processing it and talking to Bree about it, it loses just a little bit for me for 2 reasons. But the reasons why I love it, it is great representation of plus size. It has a hero who is the most respectful, fantastic, wonderful dreamboat that I've ever read. I loved him. But I think that they almost talked about her way too much. Like, there's literally a part of the book where, I just forgot what her name was. Where April writes this big long thing about how, like, please don't reference my weight all the time. Like, I just am fat. Like, I know that I'm fat. I don't want it to be my identifier. And then every situation we were in, like, it had to relate to her weight. And I know that part of that is, as a big woman, you, like, do that. But also you don't all the time. Especially when you're telling everyone else, like, I don't know. And then also, we have repeatedly seen Marcus being so and he is hot for this woman. Oh my God, his thoughts about her. I love it. That's my favorite thing about plus size heroines, is when they have a hero who's just like, I want it. Like, of course we do, because we want to feel sexy too, right? But when there would be conflicts between them, we've seen over and over that the man loves everything you got going on. And then when he would mess up, she would immediately think the worst about him. Like, immediately. And the hero, and this is also lost a little bit for me, is that Marcus is a beta, and that's okay, because I like beta heroes sometimes. And you wouldn't think that he was because of who he is, but he is always feeling shame, and anytime he messes up, he immediately apologizes, which is great. But also, by the end of it, he says to her in one of their fights, he's like, you don't understand the walls I've been having to leave up. I know I didn't go into the plot or whatever. You can literally find the plot for this book anywhere because everyone's reading it. So I'm not going into that part of it. I'm just giving you my opinions here. And I love this. Again, 4.5 stars because there was so many real, raw conversations, and I loved it. The only thing for me is that this is women's fiction, and it's as close to perfection as I've read a women's fiction book get, while only giving me like 2 sex scenes, which just was a travesty for how sexy this man found her that we got 2, which is why I don't like women's fiction, because you build these people with this amazing sexual chemistry, and then they'll be like, they started when it was over. Oh my God, if I have to read ... in a book when the chemistry you've built is so perfect, and then you're like, afterwards they were lying together, and I'm like, what are you doing? Anyway, I'm showing myself. I know I'm showing myself. It's fine. So yeah, that just became, should we switch around? There we go. That just became kind of an issue for me. Not the sex part, but that it became all about the ways that Marcus had to fix what happened. And I know part of that comes from, like, he's the one who tells the lie. But I felt at a certain point, like, yes, he needed to tell his lie. But when he's telling her, he's like, at what point was I supposed to tell you this? Because you wouldn't have trusted me enough to wait around. And then once you trusted me enough, I was going to hurt you. And he has a big secret he's holding. And until he knew, like, and he knew, and she throws it in his face like, you didn't trust me. And he's like, I absolutely do trust you. It's just that I knew that I would lose it. And he was living with such anxiety. And, like, Marcus broke my heart just as much as April did. Because here's the thing, like, I don't know. So I just felt like once it all came out, they both had their valid grievances. April totally justified that she was like, we need a break. Like, I think I'm breaking up. Got it. But once they were getting back together, I wanted her to say, you know, after thinking about it, I realized what parts of this that, like, wasn't fair to you, for me to put all of my past, you know, sexual issues, body issues, stuff on you. And I'm sorry that I always think the worst of you. Because here's the thing, like, I have heard this advice I myself am not married or in a relationship, but my friends who are, they say, you will always do so much better in your relationships if you will assume the best out of the person and then question it. You know, like, don't just assume the worst. And I know April has a history and blah, 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 whatever. I just wanted her to acknowledge it. That's all that I wanted. I'm not saying that she should have acted any differently, because she does see the disparity in their relationship, and she does feel that. I just wanted it to be, like, acknowledged in the text that that is something we'll be working on too. Because again, this is another one where, like, there's that big fun ending and then boop, it's over. I'm very excited for the setup. Slow Burn is what the next book is going to be called, and it's going to be about Alex, and I want that so bad because Alex was set up fabulous in this book. But that's my feelings. That's why I couldn't give it a full 5 stars, because I don't think that Marcus was the only one in the wrong. I think that April also jumped to some conclusions about him, and then when he was so vulnerable with her, because she's thinking it in her head, like when she's having her, like, moment where it all clicks into place, she's thinking it in her head that she made a mistake in abandoning him, but we don't get to see her say it to him. They just have a big happy, you know, thing at the end, and then I wanted to see them talk about it, so there's that. But all right, it has completely darkened out there, and you just see my shiny face in the camera, which is fine. But thank you so much for watching this. I put up new videos 4 to 5 times a week. Make sure you check out my Discord down below if you want to chat with us. Check out the romance Discord if you want to chat with romance, booktube as a whole. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.